one of my favorite stories is, please tell me, I've already told it to people because it's so great, your interaction with Steven Spielberg on Goonies. Some of my favorite things ever.
Yeah, well, I was, I'd come from here and nobody knew that. So I went into this kind of innocent, kind of beautiful thing. It's like the Goonies. And I got kicked out of my house by my mom in Santa Barbara. I stopped by the bottle shop. My mom was picking up a bottle of booze. I saw this dude. I saw my girlfriend, Stacy Gunderson, and I had to say goodbye. And I was crying and all that. So I drove my Honda Civic wagon, just the lamest car you could be driving, down there, and I stayed on my dad's couch. My dad was with, his second wife at that time, not yet his wife. And I really wanted to try something new. I had missed 36 out of 56 days of school in Santa Barbara High. And so I wasn't really going anyway. And so I went down there and I said and I started martial arts. I started doing martial arts on a crazy level, twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. And then I thought maybe I should do this acting thing. It's kind of what everybody resorts to when they don't know what to do. They either become a real estate agent or an actor.
100%.
So I chose acting. And then I made up a total bullshit resume. I remember the Libero Theater.
Yeah, of course.
But I said the Librero International Theater. And I did. And I'd known a couple of plays, and I wrote them down. Anyway, I think they probably knew, but then one agent finally picked me up. I think she knew, and she finally picked me up. And what was the initial question that you asked?
Steven.
Oh, Steven.
Yeah.
So I went through 350 auditions.
Wait, is that real?
That's no. On my children.
350 auditions.
On my children. I remember 4 auditions a day at some point. Or I would go in there and I'd hear you, or I'd hear, Sean or whoever else, like Chris Penn, you know what I mean?
You'd hear us behind the wall.
And then fuck, they're good. And then come out, and then I would get in there, and I would always get super nervous. I've always been a very kind of fear-based person,
Those are the days when you had to audition in front of people. That now everybody's on Zoom and on tape. But when we came up, literally, you would sit in a room
hallway,
and you'd hear somebody just crushing it on the other side of the door. I'm like, I wasn't going to do it that way.
Yeah.
And then Tim Hutton would walk out with his Oscar in his hand.
With an Oscar in his hand.
Right?
Totally. No, seriously. And so it was, I think Goonies was quite an accident. I went in there, I'd been told they pulled the Brolin thing. Are you Brolin's kid? Yeah. Okay. You want to be an actor, huh? So instead of that kind of nepotistic thing, which I think you probably understand, they looked at me and they were like, oh yeah? So act.
Yeah. Show us.
And I'd be like, I'm not going to help you because I know that you think you're going to make it because, which is just ridiculous. So I studied, and this is the setup, is I studied and I got Stanislavski books, and I got Grotowski, The Poor Theater, and I got Antonin Artaud and The Theater of Cruelty. I mean, I literally stayed in a bookstore 90% of the time, just reading. And then I met Dick Donner and Steven Spielberg, and I just looked right for that part. You look at Sean Astin, you look at the type of movie it is. I didn't look like I looked like a little bit of a bad boy, but sort of a jock, and I was in good shape or whatever. So they're like, that's the guy. I went back 6 times just so they could make sure. And then I did it. And then I was on the set, I'm reading all this stuff with these tiny little wooden trailers. And I came to Steven at some point, and we were in one of the tunnels, and I said, hey, Steven, can I talk to you for a second? He was like, yeah, sure.
You're how old at this point? Just give me that.
16.
Okay.
Really dumb, too, because I'd missed a lot of school. So I said, hey, what do you think about, don't you think that the tunnels kind of represent my mother's womb? And what if we film me kind of climbing up the tunnel, but really I'm trying to cut that emotional umbilical cord of my mother, and I could have tears coming down my face. And I went into this whole thing, and I was getting all excited because he was nodding his head. And then I waited. And then he looked at me and he said, why don't you just act? Just say the words on the page, you'll be fine.
It's my favorite thing.
No, but that's the truth. And I could have been like, Dick, but I didn't. I was like, oh, totally. I got it. Right? For sure. I was thinking the same thing. What am I thinking? Yeah.
Keep it simple,
Keep
right?
it simple, stupid.
That's
truly.
like,
yeah.
I had a friend who did a movie with Clint, who appears in your book.
Yeah.
A lot of people have great appearances in your book, and I want to get to Tommy Lee Jones and Nick Nolte in a minute.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine was a young actor like you, and we grew up idolizing these guys.
Yeah,
They're our
totally.
heroes. That's why we got in the business, and then we find ourselves on a set with them if we're lucky enough. And my friend was co-starring with Clint. And Clint is a man of few words. He hadn't said anything, really, to my friend who's starring in the movie. It's first day of shooting, sun's not even up. He's like, my friend's sweating, going, I don't even know what we're doing. And he gathers up his nerve, knocks on Clint's dressing room. Clint goes, yeah. He's like, I just was wondering, like, it's our first day, and everything. And like, if you wanted to maybe, I don't know, talk about what we're, like how we're going to, I don't know, do it and stuff like that. What we're going to do. And Clint goes, well, I think we're going to hit our marks and say a few words.
But like for real, verbatim.
Right? The old school guys, right?
It's true. Just do your stuff.
Explain to me the Nick Nolte is like, how would you do it's great. There's a literary conceit. And if I was smart enough about literature, I'd know what it is. But like the character that comes waiting for Godot, that comes through the book, that doesn't ever, he's kind of sprinkled throughout it. And yet you don't really ever have that relationship with him, but he's kind of like this knowing figure that's observing you.
But I did. I mean, you brought it up earlier. It's like, what people did you choose? Like, I was very conscious of not name dropping. There's a story in there about famous people trying to impress other famous people, and it's kind of like a satire.
Right.
And then it goes into this guy trying to impress this famous person by dropping famous names. And then it finally gets deconstructed into this place where this guy gets so fucking tired and nothing's working. And he finally gets to this place where he has these really kind of visceral, basic memories of people that may have been in his life that will never be known.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just people. Like the person he fell in love with in that train station, and the relationship literally lasted in Copenhagen 4 hours. And when he left on that train at 18 years old, she was crying. And that's the truth. So you go down into that memory, and the whole point is like, I really stopped myself from doing that. Like, I don't want to do names. I could have done it,
For sure.
Things instantly go to number one when you do that. This one.
Number 3.
Perhaps. Number 3?
Number 3, but who's counting?
All right, good. Number
Twice.
3.
Anyway.
No, I hear you. But the truth is that, like Nick was in my life in a major way. Nick saved my life. I don't have that in the book. So the moment that, and I'll try not to go off on too long of a tangent, but the moment I got in a fight with my wife, I have red cords on, I'm 20 years old, I have a 6-month-old kid. They were probably OPs. I had no shoes. I had no shirt on. I was in some kind of like frenetic rage or whatever. And I'm walking down the street on Columbus Avenue by 85th Street, between 85th and 86th, and I look to my left, or 84th, I look to my left, and I somehow never had seen him before, locked eyes with Nick Nolte. And I knew at that moment, I was looking at him, seeing my future, and he was looking at me, seeing his past. Wow. And I was like, it was just a moment. And it wasn't actor to actor, it was actor to some crazy dude on the street. You know what I mean? So you take that, and then that story turns into Philip Seymour Hoffman, and me talking to him, and him having one foot in the direction that he wanted to go, which was away from me, and the other one that was willing to hear me out a little bit. Cut to, how many years later I'm doing a scene with Nick Nolte. This close. And we're breathing. He had this idea of breathing in the same pattern. He was like, I'm going to kill you, which is in the movie, right? And he said, I'm gonna find your breath, and when you breathe in, I'm gonna be breathing out. When you breathe, I'm like, this is fucking Nick Nolte. This is the gnarly shit. You know what I mean? And then later on, I actually got involved deeply in drugs, and he saved my life. And the whole relationship lasted up until very recently, until I moved.
Last time I ran into Nick Nolte,
yeah,
he was in his pajamas.
Always.
At the market in Malibu.
The market, right.
And he was like, you still live next to Martin Sheen? I go, I do. Because he goes, where is Marty anyway? And I said, he's actually in Nicaragua.
Yeah.
He's working with the Sandinistas.
Yeah.
He goes, oh, Nicaragua. And he fell into a can of
I know the story.
potted beans.
I know the story. Yeah. But it's more like when he talked to you, he went, he didn't even get Nicaragua out.